Welcome, titans of the unseen grind, monsters of momentum, and keepers of the silence that shook the world. You came here, not for comfort, not for applause, not to be coddled, but to hear the truth echo in your bones. You came here to feel the weight of what you've done settle on your shoulders like armor, not burden. You didn't walk through fire for recognition. You walked through it because that's where you were forged. And now, here you stand. You didn't make noise. You made history. You moved in shadows while others begged for spotlights. You stayed hungry while they feasted on cheap praise. You kept building, stacking, bleeding, while they clapped for themselves for showing up. They screamed for attention. You whispered, and the world stopped to listen. Because what you built wasn't a moment, it was a movement. And now, it's too late for them to catch up. No one's ready for what you just did. And that's exactly how you planned it. You didn't post every rep, every sleepless night, every betrayal that tried to shatter you. You buried them deep and used them as fuel. You let the scars harden. You let the rage cool into focus. You let the world laugh, and you sharpened your will on the edge of their mockery. They thought silence meant surrender, but you were only becoming inevitable. While they were busy making noise, you were busy becoming something they can't understand. A force, a legend, a reckoning. Do you hear it now? That silence? That's the sound of them realizing they were never in your league, that they never saw the storm coming because it moved like you. Quiet, disciplined, relentless. They confused your stillness for weakness, your patience for passivity. But you were the calm before the apocalypse. You were calculating, calibrating, engineering the collapse of every excuse, every doubt, every limitation they tried to trap you with. And now they're choking on the dust you left behind. They don't know the weight you carried. They never saw the nights you didn't cry because you were too numb to feel, too locked in to fall apart. They'll never know how many times you died just to be reborn, sharper, harder, colder, until finally the old you was gone and the only thing that remained was something they couldn't break. They were playing games. You were building an empire, and now that empire stands, and it casts a shadow long enough to bury their noise forever. You didn't beg for validation. You took your pain and built an altar out of it. You sacrificed comfort, safety, popularity. You gave up everything that didn't serve your rise. And in return, the universe gave you something no one can steal: power. Not the kind you flaunt, but the kind that shakes the room when you walk in. The kind that turns doubters into disciples. The kind that rewrites the laws of what's possible. Because history doesn't remember the loudest. It remembers the ones who changed everything. Let them look confused. Let them pretend they didn't notice until now. Let them scramble to align with what they once ignored. Let them say they always believed in you. You owe them nothing. This wasn't for them. This wasn't for their applause, their posts, their fake love. This was for you. This was for the version of you that held on when it would have been easier to quit. For the you that smiled through storms no one knew existed. For the you that was told, you're not enough, and didn't just prove them wrong, you made them irrelevant. You didn't just survive, you evolved. While they were chasing trends, you were becoming timeless. While they were talking, you were transforming. And now they can't ignore you, because the world is standing on something you built. The silence is over. But don't let them mistake this moment for your peak. This isn't your final form. This is just the warning shot. Because what you've done so far, that's just the prelude, the prologue, the opening credits to a saga that will shake the future. They wanted you quiet. Now your silence is loud enough to haunt them. They wanted you small. Now your presence bends reality. They wanted you to doubt, but now their own fear tastes familiar. You are no longer just a person. You are a consequence, a force of nature born from rejection, discipline, and fire. And there's no going back. The price you paid to be here, the years, the losses, the sacrifices that stacked like bricks, that price built something unshakable, something eternal. And now it's theirs to witness, not touch. Because this is your throne, and you earned it with blood they'll never understand. You didn't make noise. You made history. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't ask for handouts. You didn't plead for the world to recognize your worth. You built it, quietly, brutally, day by day, decision by decision. While they were busy looking for easier paths, you were carving your own into the stone with bare hands and bloodied fists. You didn't want it easy. You wanted it easy. You wanted it real. And now, you've got something real, something undeniable, something unshakable. You didn't just make a statement. You made a legacy. They talk about hustle like it's a brand. You lived it like it was a religion. You didn't chase success. You hunted it down, cornered it, and broke it until it served your name. While others fantasized about goals, you bled for results. You weren't interested in being liked. You were built to be remembered. And now, they remember. They whisper your name when you leave the room. They copy your moves without even knowing what birthed them. They stare in awe at what they swore would never happen. But you're not surprised, because you knew. Every painful rep, every sacrifice, every lonely night, it was a seed. And while they laughed at the dirt, you kept planting. You knew harvest would come, and now it has. But it didn't come gently. It came with shockwaves, with fear, with the realization that they were wrong about you, about themselves, about what's possible. You didn't make noise. You made the ground shake beneath their feet. They called you crazy, obsessive, too intense. But it's only madness until it manifests. And now it's genius. Now it's glory. Now it's proof. The same people who tried to tame your fire are now warming their hands by it. But don't forget, they didn't believe. They didn't invest. They didn't suffer with you, so they don't get to celebrate with you. Let them watch. Let them admire. Let them choke on every time they said, "It's not gonna work." Let them sit in the back while your name is written across walls they'll never be invited into. You didn't become this through inspiration. You became this through obsession. You made sacrifices no one clapped for. You endured pain no one saw. You carried burdens so heavy, most would have crumbled beneath them. But you didn't break. You transcended. You didn't lower your standards to fit in. You raised your game until the world had no choice but to rise with you, or be left behind. And now they're too late. They could have walked with you, but they mocked your silence. They saw your discipline and called it arrogance. They saw your focus and mistook it for emptiness. They didn't understand that while they were sleeping in, you were sharpening your edge. That every no you heard was a notch in the blade. That every door slammed in your face was a countdown to the moment you'd break the whole damn building down. This isn't revenge. This is revelation. This is what happens when discipline meets destiny, when hunger meets hatred, when the dreamer dies and the doer takes over. This is what happens when someone refuses to quit, even when quitting would have made more sense. When someone chooses to suffer now so they can be sovereign later, you were never chasing trophies. You were building an empire, and now it stands, unshaken as a monument to every second you were underestimated. They said you were overthinking. No, you were overbuilding. You were preparing for a storm they didn't see coming because they never knew what it meant to be the storm. You kept receipts, not out of spite, but so you'd never forget who doubted you, who laughed, who walked away when the world was too dark to see what you were becoming. Now that same darkness is where they hide, while you stand in the light of your own fire. And still, you're not done. Because this isn't the finish line. This is the warning shot. This is the moment they realize you've barely tapped into your final form. You didn't just build history, you built momentum. And momentum is a dangerous thing in the hands of someone with no limits. You've crossed the line from potential to power, from ambition to ascension. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't wait for someone to tell you, it's your time. You took it. You made it your time. And now they can't look away. They can't go back to ignoring you because the world echoes with the sound of your footsteps. And the loudest thing they'll ever hear is the silence that follows your legacy. The silence that reminds them you were working while they were watching. You were becoming while they were pretending. You were suffering in sense while they were screaming for attention. And now, they've run out of noise. But your story? It's just beginning, because you didn't come this far to prove a point. You came to change the game, to rewrite the rules, to burn down the old world and build a new one from its ashes. And you're doing it, one move at a time, one quiet, unstoppable, world-breaking move at a time. You didn't make noise. You made every second count. You made sweat mean something again. You made sacrifice look sacred. You made pain profitable. You turned rock bottom into solid ground and built a throne out of the rubble. They tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were the seed. And now, you're the forest, the mountain, the storm. So let them talk, let them scream, let them cling to what's left of their doubts. It won't save them, it won't stop you. Because the world finally realizes what you already knew, that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. It means preparation. It means the kind of strength that doesn't need applause to validate its presence. The kind of strength that doesn't flex. It finishes. And you finished everything they said you'd never start. But you're not satisfied. Because the ones who make history don't stop to admire it. They use it as a launch pad. They burn their own blueprints and start again. They raise the bar even when no one's asking them to. Because greatness isn't an act. It's a mindset, a responsibility, a burden, and a blessing. And you carry it all like a crown made of fire. You didn't make noise. You became the thing that silence remembers. The difference between you and them is this. They needed noise to feel alive. You needed purpose. They needed applause to believe they were worth something. You needed nothing but the silence that reminded you exactly where you stood. And now, that silence is no longer a void. It's your monument. It's the echo of something eternal. A place where people speak your name, not with noise, but with reverence. You didn't build hype. You built truth. And truth outlasts trends. Truth doesn't rust. It doesn't bend under pressure. It doesn't fade with fame. You built something that can't be replaced because it wasn't mass-produced. It was hand-forged in pain. in solitude, in madness. You poured the ugliest parts of your soul into it and refined it into something no one can duplicate, and they know it. That's why they watch you with wide eyes now. That's why they whisper when you walk in. Because deep down, they understand. You weren't made by the crowd. You were made despite it. They mocked your obsession, but now they study your methods. They ridiculed your work ethic, but now they try to imitate your moves. But here's the truth. They'll never say out loud. They weren't built for this. They weren't built for the nights you didn't sleep, for the mornings that came without comfort, for the days that blurred into weeks because all that existed was your mission. They weren't built to hold it together when life tore you apart. But you were. You didn't crumble. You recalibrated. You didn't complain. You calculated. You didn't retreat. You refused. And that refusal, that sacred, angry, defiant no, was the catalyst. You said no to fear, no to failure, no to fate. You took fate by the throat and told it where to go. You wrestled it into submission. And now, when they ask how you did it, how you went from ghost to God, all you need to say is this: I didn't make noise. I made history. You carved your name into the walls of time without needing an audience. And that's the part that shakes them the most, that you did it without them, that you didn't need their love, their support, their presence, that your success makes them realize they were always extra to your story, never essential, because this was always between you and the darkness, between you and the cold, between you and the battlefield you woke up to every day. And you didn't run, you didn't fold. You stood there and bled, and won, and bled again, and won again. You earned this with full knowledge that no one would clap, that no one would see, that no one would cheer you over the finish line. You ran through that line alone, and when the dust cleared, there was no parade, just the sound of your own breath. And that was enough, because you didn't do it for them. You did it for the version of yourself that no one else believed in, but you did. You did it for the person who was laughed at, ignored, underestimated. You did it for the silence that once felt like death, but now feels like a throne, because now you are the silence. You are the moment when doubt dies, when disbelief burns, when limits vanish. You are the proof. They'll say it was sudden, that it happened overnight, that they always knew you had it in you. Smile. Let them lie to themselves. Let them sleepwalk through the dream you fought for with teeth and nails. You don't need to remind them where they were. You don't need to correct their revisionist memories. Just keep building. Keep ascending. Keep disappearing into the work and reappearing as something they can't explain. They won't understand, and they're not supposed to, because this wasn't for them. This was for warriors only, for the few, for the cursed and chosen, the ones who walk through hell and shake hands with the devil just to show him he can't own them. This was for the ones who found freedom in struggle. Power is how to silence light in rage. This was for you. And what comes next? The world isn't ready because you haven't peaked. You haven't even opened up your full potential. You've been working in first gear and still lapped the world. But now it's time to go further, to burn your own limits, to surpass the throne and aim for godhood. Not the kind that rules over people, the kind that rewrites reality for anyone who sees what's possible through you. You're a blueprint for the broken, a roadmap for the ruined, a scripture for the silent. They'll teach your story in whispers, and some will call it myth. That's fine. Let them. Because legends are never meant to be explained, only witnessed. And they're witnessing you now. The next move you make will break their understanding of what a human can become. The next level you hit will be written in a language no one's heard before. And that's the point. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to shift the ground, to scare the comfortable, to awaken the sleepers, and to lead those like you, the silent, the dangerous, the ones who've bled in silence and are ready to rise. And here's the final truth. This isn't about being better than them. It's about never becoming like them. You didn't make noise. You made war against the version of yourself that used to settle. And now, that version is buried, gone, and in its place stands something unrecognizable, something immortal. You became the silence that ends the era, and from that silence a new one begins, the silence of preparation, of rebirth, of the next level. You didn't make noise, you made history, and now the world has no choice but to remember. What do you do now that you've made history? You start again. Because those who make history don't stop, they evolve. They don't wait for the applause to fade. They're already miles into the next war. They don't pause for praise, because they know that legacy is built in silence, not in spotlights. You may have conquered this chapter, but the book isn't even halfway done. The pen is still in your hand, and there's blood on the pages, proof that you paid for every word. You see, history makers don't rest. They reset. They burn what they built, just to prove they can build it again. Stronger, faster, harder, louder in its impact, quieter in its origin. You became the blueprint that others now chase. But don't look back to check who's following. You've got no time for passengers. This next era isn't for those clapping in the crowd. It's for the ones willing to bleed behind the curtain. You've earned the right to be relentless, ruthless, unapologetic. They're still trying to understand what just happened, still trying to process how someone so quiet, so overlooked, could suddenly shake the pillars of everything they thought was secure. But you knew. You always knew. Because what they called quiet was never absence. It was alignment. What they mistook for being passive was you plotting the end of everything small about you. And now, you don't owe anyone explanations. Let them be shocked. Let them scramble to rewrite the narrative. Let them pretend they were part of your rise. You owe them nothing but distance. You didn't come this far to be understood. You came to be undeniable. And now, you are. The rules don't apply to you anymore. You don't follow trends. You move in cycles only you can measure. The calendar doesn't mark your milestones. You mark time with movements. Every step forward is a ripple in the timeline of those who dared to doubt you. Every breath you take now is a monument to the version of you that no one clapped for and who didn't need it. You are no longer part of the system. You are the system, rebuilt in your own image. Let them try to replicate your journey. They can't, because this wasn't born from theory or motivational fluff. This was born in the dark, in hunger, in heartbreak, in repetition, in obsession. This was born in the chaos of trying and failing and trying again until trying became transformation. You didn't just win, you became the win. The personification of persistence, of power, of prophecy. You were once the underdog, now you're the inevitability. And while they're still talking about the noise they made, you'll be making moves that turn cities to echoes, that shift culture, that bend perception, because your voice doesn't speak in decibels, it speaks in outcomes. Your work isn't measured in volume, it's measured in vibration. You didn't come here to be loud, you came here to be legendary. They thought you'd burn out. They didn't realize you were the fire. They thought you were done. They didn't understand you were just shedding your old skin. They thought this was your masterpiece. But for you, this was just a warm-up. What's coming next is something no one's prepared for, not even you. Because when you live like this, when you live with fire in your bones and steel in your silence, you evolve into something unpredictable, unstoppable, untouchable. You become your own storm system, your own God, not above people, but above fear, above doubt, above limits. You become a mirror for the broken, a torch for the lost, and a warning for the weak. They'll try to catch up. They'll try to figure you out. Let them try. While they're studying your last move, you're making the next one. While they're busy copying your formula, you're burning the playbook and inventing something they'll never be ready for. You don't repeat. You resurrect again and again. Stronger, sharper, scarier. You've already made history. Now it's time to become the myth. The one they whisper about behind closed doors. The name they etch into conversations when they talk about the shift. The moment everything changed. You'll be the line between eras, between what was and what will never be again. And all of it was born from silence, from patience, from the deep, dark, brutal stillness where your demons couldn't find you, but your purpose could. And it did. You answered that call with sweat, with sacrifice, with scars. And now the world must live with the consequence. You didn't make noise. You made a world-changing frequency, a vibration that can't be muted, a signal that cuts through everything fake, everything weak, everything temporary. You don't rise anymore. You levitate. And when your feet touch the ground, even gravity steps back in respect. So what do you do now? You keep going. Because the ones who make history don't sit in museums. They move, they live, they breathe evolution, and they never apologize for it. You're not done. You're reborn. So, here we are. Not at the end, but at the edge. The edge of something that can't be explained, something that can't be taught in schools or measured in charts. The edge of what happens when someone refuses to die small, when someone chooses to bleed in silence, and from that silence, build a cathedral so loud it deafens history itself. You've walked through that fire. You've carried the burden. You've been hated, forgotten, dismissed, undercut, betrayed, and still, you rose. Not with a scream, not with a banner, but with footsteps so heavy they left footprints in the soul of time. Because you didn't come here for applause. You didn't come here for followers or likes. You came here to become, and you became. Not overnight, not with luck, not with help, but through discipline forged in darkness, through rage shaped into resilience, through focus so narrow it cut through the noise like a blade through flesh. And now you don't just stand tall, you cast a shadow that stretches across industries, across generations, across minds too small to even comprehend what you did. You didn't just accomplish a goal, you shifted reality. You made the impossible blink. You made fate back down. You redefined what it means to be undeniable. That's the thing about making history. It doesn't feel like victory when you're in it. It feels like isolation, pain, repetition, doubt. It feels like falling out of love with who you are and building someone stronger in your place. That's why most people quit before they arrive, because making history costs more than most are willing to pay. But you paid with time, with tears, with entire versions of yourself that had to die so that this weaponized, ruthless, unshakable version could live. And now, the world will never be the same. But let this be clear, this isn't the end of the speech. This is the ignition of your legacy. This is the moment where everything you've done becomes a blueprint for others who feel voiceless, invisible, broken. You've become more than a person. You've become proof. Proof that silence is a strategy, that suffering is sacred, that obsession isn't a flaw. It's a compass pointing you towards something greater than comfort. Let them say whatever they want. Let them rewrite their version of events. Let them pretend they were with you from the beginning. The truth knows better. You know better. You carried this vision like a curse. You buried dreams in places no one dared to dig. You made a life out of ashes and sharpened your bones into tools. And now you've built something they'll study for decades. But your job isn't to stay here, smiling at statues of yourself. Your job is to keep going, to leave this mountain and build the next one. To never become comfortable in the empire you've built, because comfort is where greatness goes to rot. Let them cling to what they think is success. You've got your eyes on eternity. And if anyone asks you how you did it, how you stayed the course, how you didn't quit, how you kept showing up when no one showed up for you, just look them in the eye and say, I didn't make noise. I made history. Then walk away, because there's more to build, more to destroy, more to become. History was just your beginning. The legacy, that's eternal, and it's waiting for you.